welcome back. I'm Jeremy Ward with Ward Realty Services. This is part 2 of our vacant land training today. Just a few minutes ago, we did a class about listing on vacant land, and we have determined that this ground, after we measured it, this tract the seller has called us about on Ripperton Valley, in the corner of Ripperton Valley and Heath Washington Road in Harrison County. The seller says it's 40 acres. We've measured and we think it's between 38 and 40 because, again, we don't have a survey at this point to tell us exact. So at this point, we're going to talk about representing a buyer. This property's been listed. It's going to be listed at 40 acres because the seller, of course, thinks he's got 40 acres and very well may have once we get the survey done. So we're going to go through a purchase agreement on vacant ground, an unimproved property. You can get this in zip forms through SIRA. And I'm going to start off here with the map showing 38.9 because, again, the seller wants to do it at 40, but I'm going to go ahead and clear it. So keep in your mind that we think this acreage is 40 plus minus acres. That gets us close. That's the way it's been listed. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this out on the measurement. So now you've got a clear piece of property. Again, this is what it looks like on the listing. They've listed this 40 plus minus acres at the corner of Heath Washington and Ripperton Valley Road. We're going to start with the contract. I'm just going to go over again the highlighted areas that I hear a lot of questions on from agents in the office and in the market. So we filled out the buyer's name. We've got the property address. The legally described, again, we're going to talk about the legal description. So we're going to go over the purchase agreement here, and we're going to start with the legal description. That is one of the most commonly asked questions. We're just going to kind of highlight the areas that I get the most questions on throughout my office and throughout other agents that call me. So we've got the buyer's name on the contract. We got the date. We've got the property known as 40 plus minus acres at the corner of Heath Washington and Ripperton Valley Road in Harrison County. We're going to drop a legal description in. It's going to have, as we know on this, there's parcels. This farm still shows about 80 to 100 acres left on this tract. We're only selling 40 of it, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the full legal description in that the seller has provided or the listing agent has provided. Today, I'm going to be representing my buyer who wants to buy it. So I've got that information in there. They've listed this at X price. We're going to go through first and just say the buyer wants to buy the whole parcel that we've listed. And then we'll go back through and say, well, the buyer has changed his mind. He only wants to buy, let's say he wants to buy half or 10 acres of it. We'll cover that here in a minute. So we're going to go down to method of payment, line 50. Most of the time, this ground's going to be purchased with cash. That's the easiest way. Or conventional or insured conventional. Again, you're going to want to probably talk to a local bank. They seem to be the ones that will lend mostly on vacant ground, or again, Rural First used to be Farm Credit. They have great programs for vacant ground or farm ground, wooded ground, anything that doesn't have a home on it. Those are the guys you probably want to start sending your buyers to. You know, if they've got a local lender they work with as this bank, usually they'll loan on that property. So we'll kind of buzz through this. Let's go to the second page. Line 112 under maintenance of property. When we talked about listing the property, we made it real clear with the seller that he needed to move all debris and trash and anything that's not bolted to the property basically, or a building, any kind of junk needs to be taken off the property prior to closing unless otherwise agreed. So the maintenance of the property, there's a highlighted area there that says seller shall remove all debris and personal property not included in this sale. So basically, when you do your walkthrough with your buyer, you want to make sure that that stuff is moved, and hopefully you've already talked to the listing agent about and asked them, hey, is this old school bus, this old tractor trailer, this old junk car, this crap that's in this sinkhole, is it all going to be removed, or is it seller plan on leaving that? So get real clear with your buyer and seller what's going to happen there, get it in writing so we don't get the closing and have an issue. That can tend to be a little embarrassing if stuff's not moved that was supposed to be moved, or if stuff that was taken that was supposed to stay. So that's a really something to pay attention to when you're walking this ground. Again, I advise you to get out and walk the ground with the buyer, cover as much of it as you can. One of the things I like to do if the property is not surveyed and really visibly marked, on your Elevate on your phone, you can go in and pull up that parcel. And then I think on my phone, it's an Apple, on the bottom right-hand side, there's a little dot. You can click that dot, and that'll actually show you where you're standing. And it doesn't do it on our desktop here, but if I'm standing here at the road, it'll show me right where I'm at, and the seller's like, where's the boundary? I don't see the boundary. You can click on that dot, and then you can start walking towards that corner, and that dot will show up right there when you're on that corner. It is not 100% exact, but a lot of times it'll get you close enough where you can see a marker, a fence corner, something that kind of outlines maybe a sign that the agent put there that, yeah, this is pretty close. It hasn't been surveyed, but you're in the general area. I'd advise you to get a survey if you want to be exact. So that's a little tool that is on Elevate on your mobile device. It's super handy. Like, you get out on some of these farms and you're 100 acres of trees and you can't see the light, let alone the corner. So you could kind of follow that dot, head in the direction on your screen to find those corners or find landmarks maybe. And you could even screenshot if it's a point where the buyer says, oh my gosh, I want to build my house right here. Well, take that dot, screenshot it, and send it to him. And that way he can kind of figure out where he's at, maybe if they go back out with you to show you that, or show their parents, or show their family where they want to build their home. So that's something that's been hugely helpful for me over the past. So we've talked about the seller removing trash. Let's talk about the survey. Sometimes the surveys have not been done on these. Sometimes they're done, they're marked clearly, and it makes it easy. But again, I use that device to find the general corners in the property and the locations that you're looking for. We're going to talk about surveys. If there's not been a survey, and a little bit later we're going to talk about maybe breaking up this land. You know, the buyer don't want all of it. I can tell you how to figure out a price for that. So we'll cover that here in a little bit. So on this property, it's not been surveyed. It's buyers, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, do you want to have this property surveyed? Okay, great. I think it's a great idea to have it surveyed. Are you willing to pay for it? Is the seller willing to pay for it? That's a negotiation. Or is it something that we can share equally? That's all on your contract, and that's just a negotiation between the buyer and the seller. We're going to drop down to inspections. And, a lot of times with vacant ground, the buyers ask, well, what kind of inspections would you do on vacant ground? Like, there's no building to really inspect. Well, this is where you're going to cover, okay, are you buying this ground to build on? Are you buying this ground to hunt on? Are you buying this ground to farm? Is it just an investment piece of property? We're going to say for this that it's something they want to build on. So one of the first things you want to find out, has the property been perked? Most of the time on vacant ground, it's not been perked. The seller, it doesn't really help them to perk it on a great big farm because they don't know where the buyer really wants to build their house location. Like, where are we going to build this house? So one of the things you're going to need to talk to the buyer, their builder, and the health department, where is a good place for us to perk this, contingent upon where we're going to build the house. So I always have the buyers have the perk test. Usually the buyer will pay for their own perk test because it's in the location of where they want to put their own home. Perk tests can range from $300, $400. You will there's several in our area. Talk to your broker. He's probably got some that he can recommend to you to use. So one of the things that you want to do in this and later on is get permission from the seller and other provisions to do a perk test. To make sure it's okay to go out and dig on this guy's farm, or maybe it's got crops in it and we've got to dig in a certain area. Like, that can get a little crazy. We want to make sure we got permission when we go out there and tear up this ground. Another thing that you want to look at is a contingency. If they're going to build a house with a basement, we probably want to do some test holes, and have your builder and an excavator come out and locate, and the builder say, this is where the home's going to go. And then we want to dig down so far to make sure we're not going to hit rock. Because it can get real expensive for your buyer when he buys this property and he thinks he's got a budget of $500,000 and he hits rock. All of a sudden we're at $550,000 and they may not have the money. So just spending some money up front with an excavator and having the time for your builder to come out and locate where you're going to build, dig down whatever the builder says. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 10 feet. Okay, great. We don't hit rock. that's going to be, great with your budget. We're good. Now, if we hit rock, we may need to move a little bit. So you want to make sure that you get some permission for that as well. We'll cover some more of these questions towards the end. So then you want to put a time range in with perk test and test hose. You don't want to go out and do it when it's wet. You can't really perk a piece of property when it's real wet. We need some dry weather. And the guy that does your perk test, when you go to schedule it, he's going to be able to look at the weather and tell you about when he can get there. And right now, our guys, just like our surveyors and our builders, they're all really busy. So make sure you give yourself ample time to be able to go out and do these test holes and these perk tests. I'm going to say 2 weeks is probably not enough. I would try to get, maybe 3 weeks and then ask for an extension if you need to, because we have a lot of rain in the springs around here. In the midsummer, you might not need as much. Let's go to the next page. Let's talk about taxes. So if you're buying the whole tract, the easiest thing to do usually is just prorate taxes on the time they own it. Basically, the seller's going to pay for every day they own the property. The buyer's bill will start the day they close and move forward. One of the things, if we do divide this property, which we're going to do here in a minute, what's the tax bill? It was $1,000 on 40 acres. I'm only buying 20 of it. What is it? Well, you're going to prorate that total bill by the acres, and that's going to give them, if the total bill is $1,000, say, on 40 acres, and you're only going to buy 20 of it, the tax bill is probably going to be about $500. But that's something you can work with the title company to prorate that tax amount that the seller is going to credit the buyer at closing. That's something that comes up a lot, like how do we figure out the taxes? And we're going to go to the next page. A lot of this stuff's pretty standard. We went over it in the listing folder, or the listing presentation. The listing agent's going to have, if there's any kind of restrictions, community associations, that sort of thing. They should have listed any kind of environmental things that the seller's aware of, any conditions there. Obviously, we want to try to get the property conveyed by a warranty deed. That's the best one to have. Further conditions and zoning requirements. So this is where, we've marked that we're going to do a perk test because like a piece of ground like this, it's going to be on septic, and most likely the guy's going to build. This is where you're going to be real specific about your contingencies. I see a lot of contracts come in that says contingent upon a perk test. Okay, does it mean it's going to pass, fail? Is it satisfactory to the buyer? What is it? And when you're getting negotiations, somebody starts walking away from a deal, the seller's going to say, you're going to need to know what's the contingency that we have to meet here. So we like to say, if the buyer's looking to the builder says we're going to want to do a gravity system, which is basically a lot of times the least expensive system out there to fit this gentleman's budget. Okay, we're going to make it contingent upon satisfactory perk test for a gravity system. Because if it perks, not for a gravity, but maybe we need a pump or a mound system, that can get more expensive and create your buyer to have to, come out of their pocket for something maybe they couldn't get on their loan. So you got to be real specific about that. On these, when you go out here, is it going to be a basement house? Is it going to be a slab? Is the builder okay with the way the land lays? So we want to make sure, it's contingent upon the, buyer satisfaction of a gravity system, builder satisfaction of location, and style of home to be put on this ground. Anything that you can think of that that's going to have to happen. Maybe they're going to put a barn on this property. Maybe we're going to need 2 driveways. We got to make sure that we can get 2 driveway permits. So any of this stuff that that's going to go on once the buyer is going to buy this property, it's our job as agents to put those contingencies in this contract, so we can get this due diligence done within our inspection period to make sure the buyer feels real comfortable moving forward on closing on this land, because there's nothing worse than selling a piece of ground and find out you can't do what you want on it, or your septic system is going to be twice what you budgeted for. So that's very important to be specific about your contingencies. So I'm going to give my manager, Jen, a chance to ask some questions that we've probably passed over in all this language in the contract. And we can talk about where we want to put some of this verbiage in other provisions and some of the verbiage that are commonly asked. So I know one of the things where on this particular contract, we're buying the whole property. We're buying the 40 acres, and it's contingent upon survey. We think it's 40 acres. So what if, to protect your buyer, what if we think maybe it's going to come back less than 40 acres, and we've offered, let's say, $1,000 an acre. Let's just say that for easy math. So we've offered $40,000 for this property. It's 40 acres, based on what the listings provided. We get it surveyed, and it comes back at 38. The buyer's not happy. He paid 40 grand for this, and it's only 38 acres. So what I'm going to advise you to do in other provisions is, once you all agree on a price for the 40 acres, let's just say it's $40,000, you're going to make the offer for 40 grand. But in other provisions, buyer and seller agree that this property will be $1,000 per acre contingent upon survey. That's what the purchase price is going to be, because I've bought several properties and it's listed at 40 acres and it comes in, say, at 38. Well, that just saved me $1,000 an acre, and now I'm going to pay 38 because it truly wasn't 40. Sometimes we have them surveyed and they come back, say, at 42 acres. Well, it's not fair to the seller to sell it for $40,000 at $1,000 an acre, and you just transferred 42. So you can protect buyer and seller by breaking it down at a per acre price on your contract, that whatever the survey comes out as, that's what we're going to rate the sell as for the purchase price. That has come in handy multiple times. It's probably the fairest way of doing it, and I think everybody would agree that's the fairest way of doing it, and it just comes out, whatever it surveys, that's what we're going to pay. Jen, what other kind of questions do you see on our contracts daily?
So say somebody wants to buy that property and then divide it in half once they own it, and let their children build on the other half. Can I make my purchase agreement contingent upon that further division of that?
But I think for that, like if you're going to buy it like it sits, your due diligence would be to get a hold of planning and zoning for that county, and they would tell you, based on your road frontage, based on the area you're in, how many times that property can be divided. I can tell you in Harrison County, with a big piece of ground like this, it's not a plotted subdivision, they only like to divide it once every year. And as you'll see, if I back out a little bit, I can almost show you exactly how this was done. This was all bought as one piece. You see we got a bottom track, a top track, and there's this somebody else, this Miracle Mountain owns this center track. What happened there? Well, this particular seller understood that, these guys only wanted to buy whatever that is, 15, I think it was 20 acres. And he strategically sowed out the center of this for his one split that year. And then what magically happens is all of a sudden he's got 2 tracks. So next year, he's got 2 tracks to sell rather than just being able to split it once. So if you're looking at buying a piece of property and splitting it up, that's something you want to get with the planning and zoning to figure out how many times you can split, where you would want it surveyed, maybe down the middle, rather than just doing it over here in a corner, because it really didn't provide you more tracks the following year. He's divided this once and got 2 extra tracks out of it all of a sudden. And then all he has to do is come up here and cut this in half. He's got 2 tracks here next year, then cut this one half. He's got 2 more tracks. That turns into 4 tracks. So developers and these guys that buy this ground, they understand how to work this. And that's something you just need to make a call to the county zoning. Each county's a little different on that. But in Harrison County, they like to see 1 track. Now, I think what that question would lead into is, we've been out there, we've looked at the 40 acres, and I don't want all 40, I just want 20 of it. What would that look like? Like, how can you tell me what that's going to look like? Yeah, we can give you a good rough idea as an agent prior to having it surveyed. Surveys can be $6,000, $7,000. They're fairly expensive. I can show you real quick how to measure this out and give them a rough idea of what that, I only want to buy half of that. What's that going to look like? How many acres is that going to be? So you would just come over here to the menu. You go into measure. We're going to do the polygon again. Click on it, and then we're going to go over here and mark acres. All right, now what I'm going to do, knowing that road frontage is critical for a seller, that's where the value comes for the property. The more road frontage you got, the more value you got. The seller's not going to come over here and selling half of all of his road frontage on Ripperton Valley, right? Because he just cut himself all of his road frontage off. This seller would say, yeah, maybe we'll break it up. What are you looking for? Okay, we want about half of it. So I would see you coming over to the back corner, clicking, come over to about half of it, maybe a little less, go down, cut it in half. Right now we're at about 10 acres. I'm going to go over and include this back corner. We're at 19. We're going to go back to the top. So we've got a total of 19.32 acres there. Now you can play with this and get it exactly 20, but now I can go over here and I can go to print, high quality. I can click on that and I can print this off as an overhead, or I can save it as a PDF and send to my buyer and say, that's roughly what this is going to look like. Mr. Buyer, if we cut this down to 20 acres, right there is roughly 19.32. So what that's done is it's left this seller still some road frontage up here. He could pull a lot off, and he could pull smaller lots off here and still keep the value of all this road frontage he's got by selling just kind of the back 20, right? We always talk about the back 40, but this would be the back 20 that could be pulled off of it, and the seller still have plenty of road frontage to sell more lots. So that's something you can do. You can measure these tracks out. You know, you could bust it, say, okay, Mr. Buyer, you buy this, and then, or if you buy all of it, we could sell this 20 off next year, and then that'd still leave you with all this ground here to sell off the years afterwards. So, you know, every situation's different, but the answer is you can do it. You can do it here on Elevate. You can get it close, and then always make it contingent upon survey, because we're not surveyors. We're just going off our best, you know, example, which is Elevate, and it's not 100% correct. So always make sure you do this off a survey. Get, you know, buyer and seller to agree to do a survey. Somebody's going to have to pay for it, and get the survey done. Go out there. Okay, it looks good. Now we can close. What other questions would you have, Jen?
So just to clarify, I would write my purchase agreement as 20 acres plus or minus off larger parcel number, that whole parcel.
Correct. So when
Okay.
you go in and it's not listed as a 20-acre tract, it's listed as a 40-acre tract, you're going to, you know, put your purchase price in, you know, per acre. You're going to break it off that, you know, this 20 acres to be broken off a larger tract with the legal description of. And I always do it a couple different places to make sure everybody understands. We're putting it in further conditions, and we're going to try to squeeze it up there in the first page of the purchase agreement under the legal's description, you know, the property known as 20 acres, broken off larger tract, Ripperton Valley Road, whatever your example is.
Okay. So if there was crops on that property, how would I know? Do they sign leases, like 10-year leases for farmers to farm these?
Generally, if a seller knows that he's going to be selling the property in the near future, he'll, you know, sometimes they do 5-year, 10-year leases. Typically, it's a year lease for that crop season. So if you're you know, the seller's listed the property, he's got listed on there is a crop lease, you're going to want to write in there, it may be stated that the seller is going to retain the lease for the following, you know, for that farming year, you know, as of fall, he'll be done. But you could negotiate that you're buying the property and that the buyer to keep the crop lease for 2021, say, if it's this year. But yes, you need to, if you see crops out there, you need to talk about that with the listing agent, make sure the buyer and seller agree on something, because you get to closing, there's still money laying out there in them crops, and it's got to go to the buyer or the seller. So those crop leases will already have dictated it's going to the seller. If the buyer wants it, they need to speak up, because a lot of times you'll buy it in, say, July, but the crops don't come out till December, or I'm sorry, October, November. And they're using that ground, and if it's covering crops, the buyer really don't get any use of his ground. So he needs to know that going up front. He can't go in and mow the crops down. So yes, we need to talk about that in the purchase agreement and decide what's going to happen after closing with those crops.
So if there was mineral rights, the seller needs to disclose that. Can the seller keep that mineral right lease?
So a lot of times, and especially in Harrison County where this example's at, there's gas leases, mineral rights. Sometimes it's rock underneath the ground. I know in Clark County there's some, and in Meade County there's underground caverns that they've mined rock out of. That's part of the mineral rocks or the mineral rights. So yeah, you need to talk about that. I would put in my contract, all mineral rights stay with property, transfer to buyer, make it real clear, because a lot of times, back 20 years ago, these gas leases might have paid $500-600 a month to the current owner. And if you don't specify it, they're going to keep sending that check to the previous seller. Now, if you specify that the buyer to keep the mineral rights with the property, which I would advise, you need to find out what those mineral rights are. Is it stone? Is it oil? What is it? And then find out who's paying that. Like in Harrison County, it used to be Burn Bright. Now they've switched names a few times, but after you close, you would need to take a copy of that deed down to their office and show them where you got a recorded deed for that property, so they can transfer those rights and those payments over to a new buyer's address. I've had properties that come up, that's been sold a couple years later, and the seller goes, I'm still getting these checks. What do I do? And I'm like, okay, did the buyer not transfer? So I call down to the Burn Bright, and they're like, yeah, they never came in with their deed. So I have to call the buyer back 2 years later and say, hey, you got a bunch of money waiting for you down at Burn Bright. You need to get your deed up there and let them know that you're the new owner so you can get the payment. So mineral rights are very important, especially out in these rural areas. There is rights of mineral. A lot of times around us, it's limestone and oil, that sort of thing, and gas.
Okay, so timber, if there was a lot of timber on this property, it would be in the deed restrictions if the timber could not be removed.
Yeah, so if say it's a family farm and they had restrictions put in the deed years back, maybe they want to use that as conservancy for timber, you would want to see a copy of the deed and make sure there is nothing. If your buyer is wanting to cut the timber, you want to double check that. Ask the listing agent, hey, do you know of any restrictions on the timber? Do you have a copy of the deed that we could review to make sure that when my buyer purchases this, that he's okay to go in and cut this timber? Now, sometimes you'll see classified forest signs on trees on wooded ground. Classified forest is a great program that's here locally. It's done by, I believe, the ag office. You would want to contact the ag office and see what the restrictions are. I can tell you generally, a classified forest does not mean you can't cut it. It does not mean you can't clear a section out and build a house. But in order to do that, you've got to contact them, and they will basically allow you to do the timbering, but they will manage that process. You have kind of control over it, but they try to suggest the best way of doing it so that your timber lasts and it helps future generations and future growth. Now, if you got a classified forest and you want to buy that ground and put a house on it, you can actually get with the ag office, work with them, and they will, survey out the area that you want to clear to put your house on, and that can be removed out of that classified forest. I think last time I checked, say if you want to remove 10 acres, you would have to have a payback to the classified forest people, and it's like $5 an acre. So 10 acres, it'd be, $5 per acre to pull that out. But you can remove it. But I don't want to say exactly because, every county may be a little different. But that's who you want to call is your ag or your forestry. They'll get you in the right direction. They'll let you know what your duties are to get that done, but it can be done. So, if you're showing a property that says classified forest, you can still build on it. You can still cut it. You just need to go through the proper due diligence and channels to do that. With that said, it would probably be wise when you make your offer, buyer, to be able to build a home in this area of the classified forest to be approved by the forestry people prior to closing. You don't want to buy it and then try to get it done. You want to make sure you got something in writing that can be done before we close.
What happens if I show up, how to show some vacant ground? There's nowhere to park. Shouldn't we be putting that in the showing instructions, like where to park, or you can't access the property? And then we've also come across where hunting season, we've had sellers call and say, I've given people permission to hunt on this property. We can't show it.
Yeah, they got a hunting lease, say. So a lot of times, like Jen's saying, these properties don't have a driveway yet. They don't have maybe there's a gate, but it's locked, and the seller's not going to let you drive in because it's afraid that you're going to get stuck. So a lot of times you need to put in the seller's or the agent showing instruction, hey guys, you might all want to ride together to this property or meet somewhere, or there's a pull off, 2 blocks up the road where you can park. and you can come down. But I feel like the agents should communicate that to the other agents that's trying to show the property, because it's frustrating. You know, I've had agents pull over and get stuck before because they just didn't know where to park. Hunting leases are becoming more and more common on these rural properties. And a lot of times when I list these properties, the seller, you know, he wants to sell, but he's got a hunting lease, you know, that's during, say, September through January of the next year. And most of the time they'll say, look, we don't want anybody out there during the first couple open weeks of gun season. So you'll want to disclose what those weeks are. No showings from, say, November 13th through December 12th. There's a month there where we don't want nobody on the property, because there's nothing more frustrating for a hunter that's leased property and have some agent and their clients walk right up on them. It can be dangerous. You know, some guys, if there's movement, they shoot. It could be scary. So make sure if any of those conditions are going on, you know, you cover that in your showing instructions.
Okay, also, if I was writing an offer to purchase and the listing agent, you know, doesn't know anything about the utilities, is their electric there? Is it down the road? Is that something I could call the electric company to find out?
One of the easiest things to do if the seller don't know who serves the property as far as utilities is go to a neighbor's house that you see the lights on, right? Go down there and say, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to list the property next door. Who's your electric company? Is that Harrison RMC? Is that Duke? Who do you pay your bill to? You get that information, you can call that company, and that kind of gets you on the trail. They may not serve that property. I've had properties where one side of it is RMC, the other side of it's Duke. So, but the company themselves, if they're serving that general area, they'll say, well, yeah, we serve that, no problem. Then you know it's RMC, say. Or they'll say, no, we don't serve that, but Duke does, or some other company. Same way with the water. You know, you might have to go in these rural areas. Some people may be on wells, so you might have to kind of go up the road a few more houses and get to an area that looks like, okay, these are pretty nice houses. They probably on, you know, public water, and just ask them who's serving it. Do the same thing. Usually you can track that down. Planning and zoning is another good area. You can call down there. They usually know, they've done enough research over the years. They can pretty much point you in the right direction of who's going to serve that property.
Okay, and sometimes in listings we see easements. Can you talk about what type of easements, or even what an easement is?
So, and a lot of times you've got an easement to access the property. So that's your only way in. An easement is like, say you didn't have any road frontage, but you had 100 acres that sit behind some property that's between you and the road. Most of the time in the deed there will be an easement. It may be 20 foot wide, it may be 60 foot wide, it may be 100 foot wide. The wider the better. And you would need to, you know, once you find out what size easement that is, find out what the people are wanting to buy the property. Are they wanting to build? Are they wanting to develop? Are they just wanting to hunt? Call planning and zoning and say, hey, I've only got a 20-foot easement in here. What can be done on this property? Can one house be built? Can three? Or can I only hunt it? You know, if I've got a 100-foot easement, probably to 150, I can probably put a road in and develop this property. It just depends on what county it is. Now, there's other easements that let people come across you to get to their property. And that's something else that you want to ask the selling agent, the listing agent about. Is there any easements for anybody else to come across this property to get to their property? There's utility easements. There's crop or oil and mineral right easements for them to get in, to get to their oil wells to service them. There can be all kinds of easements, and that's something that you'll find in the deed, and definitely you need to be asking that listing agent what they're aware of. Usually the sellers know if they've got an easement. Once they're asked, it kind of triggers them. Oh yeah, we did. We had an easement for a guy to get to his field back here. I need to list that. So more questions about easements, the better when it comes to doing a purchase on a piece of property.
So even as the buyer's agent, it's a good idea to get the deed. Even if the listing agent doesn't have it, as the buyer's agent, to make sure my buyer knows everything, I should get the deed. Okay. So can you clarify, test holes are maybe if you're going to build a house, you want to dig down, get rock depth. Perk tests, those are for septic. To see. Soil test, is that the same as a perk test, or is that?
So the perk test, what they're doing is they're going out and they're seeing what type of soil it lays where you're wanting to have your septic system put in. They're going to look at how well it will absorb the fluids from the septic tank and the lateral lines. It's going to tell you what type soil's there. It's going to tell them how deep they need to go, what kind of system they need to put in. The soil scientist does the perk test and basically is going to provide that information to the county, and the county is going to tell you what type of system you need. That's going to tell your builder how much to figure in for your septic system. So, some counties got really great soil, some not so good, but usually, with the perk test, the soil scientist and the county health department, they can work together and figure out a system that'll work in, if you got enough ground. So yeah, the perk test, when you dig those holes, they're just jumping down, they're doing the soil test. The test hose for the builder, he's just basically doing some test holes. Some of them may not really care, but most that I talk to in certain counties, there's a lot of rock, and they're wanting to go down deep enough to know where they can hit their footers without hitting rock, or cavern, or some bad soil. Maybe they know that there's some shifty soil that's not real stable. They may want to go down and make sure there's none of that there before they try to build a house on it, and you end up with cracked walls down the road. So it's just a good idea to give that contingency. Whether your buyer and builder want to use it, it's up to them, but you've put that protection in the contract to protect your buyer.
Can I protect my buyer just by putting in a statement in the purchase agreement that the buyer's to have 45 days to perform due diligence? Is that okay?
Well, you can, but I feel like as a seller and as a listing agent, I'm going to say, what is the due diligence that you want to do before I give you permission? So I feel like as a buyer's agent, you need to have a conversation with your buyer about what their intended purpose is of the property. Are they going to build? What are they going to do with it? And then, okay, we're going to need these contingencies. So I would say be real specific about what your buyer expects and what they're okay with, and get that up front in the contract so the seller knows what he's given permission for. And then for some reason you need to get out of the contract, that is in there for you. It's not just a general statement, because I'm sure you could talk to John Kraft and find out there's probably been lawsuits about not being specific and walking away from a contract. Maybe you either did have the right to walk away from or not. But I feel like just the more disclosure, the more specific you can be up front, the less confusion at the end of the day.
So it sounds like if I'm selling a lot to a buyer to build a home on, there's a lot that I need to have done. I need to work maybe with the county, maybe with planning and zoning, definitely with my builder, maybe already even have my plans picked out so we can make sure that it's going to fit on that property.
Yeah, you want to talk to the buyer and say, okay, are you going to do a basement? Okay, great. What type of basement? Is it going to be a walkout? Is it going to be a rear walkout? Is it going to be a side walkout? You don't have to know it real good. The builder will go out there if they've got a house plan and we know it's going to be a side walkout. You're wanting the fall of the ground to go to that side so they can dig into it to get that walkout. Or if it's a rear walkout, the house is going to have to be placed where the fall's to the rear of the house where they can dig in and get that walkout space. If it's totally flat, then we've kind of got an issue with a walkout basement. We're not experts as agents, but we should have a pretty good idea of what we're looking at, what we're looking for our clients, and not waste a lot of people's time. I know a lot of builders get pretty frustrated when they've got a plan and you're the agent, you've called them, you're excited, you want to get your buyer in a new home and a lot, and they're wanting a walkout basement, and they go out there and it's flat as can be, and they're going, I don't think I can pull it off here. Or they're wanting a slab home that needs to be fairly flat or be able to be flattened enough, and it's a roller coaster out there, and they're going, there's nowhere for me to put this home. So ask questions, talk to your broker, talk to builders, go to classes. Construction for Dummies books. I've read tons of them. That's kind of where I got my start. We built our own home, and I had to figure out what land I was looking for. I've not always been an agent. I had to kind of figure these things out as I went. But once you know it, you become very valuable to your buyers. And I think that's my message to the agents in our board, is become very valuable, very knowledgeable about what you're doing with the public, because, our industry, I feel like, is under attack. And if you can provide value, you'll have a good career. You'll have a future in this business. And the more valuable you are, the more people are going to want to work with you. And it gets around. And, somebody that's very helpful, that knows ground, they're going to talk to their friends and family about how helpful you were. And man, you saved their butt because we ducked down 3 feet and we hit solid blue limestone. As builders will tell you, that's like $1 million rock to get rid of. You're spending a couple $100 an hour to hammer that stuff out. So know what you're looking at, and if you don't know, learn. There's a lot of experienced agents in the market and just builders and such that would sit down with you and give you a crash course on it. If you need to, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Jen, what other questions would you have?
I think that's it.
Does that get it? And I think we covered it, but make sure you're getting permission for those test holes, for those perk tests, or any kind of due diligence that you're going to have done. Make sure you got permission for the surveyor to go out on a Tuesday. Hopefully nobody's hunting, right? So I hope this covered most of the items maybe that's got you scratching your head when you go to take and list and purchase a piece of property. There's a lot more that we could go into. It's endless. I'm going to tell you that Elevate is a great resource to get you started, get you headed in the right direction. And there again, your county planning and zoning, they're there, they're working for us, they're servants. Ask them questions. There's no dumb question. It could save you thousands of dollars down the road. So I appreciate your time. I want to thank Sarah for giving me the opportunity to do this class, and I hope it was helpful for you.